Hi there, I'm Reena, and this video is for Sanya and Tanvi of Bryn Mawr. They asked me a couple questions for a school project, and so I thought I would make this video for both of you, and then, hopefully for whoever's listening afterwards, that these responses might be relevant to. So let's get started. So your first question was, what drew you to begin composing? So the thing is, I don't think I realized it, but I was always composing. And it started with these little things like, I grew up before the internet was really a robust thing where you could get anything that you wanted. And so there were times when I would hear something and I would think, I want the music for that. I want to be able to play it. Whether it was, a pop song, a Broadway tune, maybe even a piece of classical music that wasn't too complicated. And so I would just write out the music myself. And again, I thought, that must be a normal thing that people do. And it turns out it isn't. Not a lot of people can just take things down from the internet and, from hearing them. And I don't have perfect pitch, so I'd have to figure it out on the piano and, but I just found it so fun to do that. And then, another thing I would do is when my friends were learning instruments and they would learn to play these songs on their instruments, and I would get such a kick out of trying to play along with them by either creating the harmony part or creating another melody to go along with them. So that was just a thing, again, that I just found really fun. And eventually I would just sometimes be playing an instrument myself. I would get bored with what was on the page and I would kind of try to create something new. And I think all those things kind of led me eventually into creating my own little pieces of music, sometimes inspired by things I heard and sometimes just kind of out of left field. I also think, I was an only child. I still am an only child. I spent a lot of time alone. And so because of that, I feel like I just had this wild imagination. And I think that's actually a really big contributor to my having a very rich inner life, because I wasn't always playing with other kids. I was kind of a loner, and I think I still am. Second question, when you were little, what music did you listen to, and how do you think that influences you? So I was trying to think about this because probably when I was your age, I was thinking, what was I really listening to? So I loved Broadway. I loved kind of these different Broadway songs. And, to be honest with you, when I was in 7th to 9th grade, but pretty much all of junior high and high school, I was super into Barbra Streisand. Like, I loved Barbra Streisand. And so basically, like, any album that she has that's from before 2000, I will know every single word of that album. And so it was interesting because when I go back, I think a lot of the things that she sang about were about, very strong female figures and people who just didn't take no for an answer, and people who just, kept their eye on the prize and got what they wanted, and that kind of attitude. And I think I was looking for that. I was looking for messages that the sky was the limit. And in fact, I named my publishing company, when you start getting royalties for your music, you make a name of a publishing company under like ASCAP or BMI or something. And mine is called A Piece of Sky Music, and it's based on this song from Barbra Streisand's movie Yentl, when a woman talks about just wanting everything and wanting to not look through the window and just see a piece of sky. She wants to actually see the whole sky and step outside and be able to experience the whole world. So it was funny because I kind of think that in so many ways that movie kind of parallels my own journey in music. The other thing I loved was piano music. I just loved listening to the things I was playing. So Debussy, Chopin, especially French piano music. I just loved it. And then the other thing, admittedly, I really loved Christmas carols. My family is half Muslim and half Catholic, but we celebrated both holidays, and Christmas was a really big thing in our family. But I just loved this idea that there was this time of year where everyone was kind of festive and people, the music kind of brought people together. And I realize now that's not always the case. Christmas music can be super alienating for people who are lonely and stuff like that too. But for me, it just felt really magical and joyful. So let's see. 3, can you talk a bit about your childhood and what events you may have experienced that led you to pursue a profession in music? So It's interesting because my parents, I seem, I'm 100% Indian, but my parents are from two very different parts of India. And like I said, they're from two different religions. And so in India, I'm a very weird breed of person. I'm not from kind of one lineage. And for my parents to even have married each other is pretty amazing. But both of them were kind of the mavericks in their family. They didn't do was what people thought they would do. My mom went off to college when she was 17 and spent, many years abroad just studying. My dad moved to the US when he was very young, and my parents met in Orlando, even though my mom grew up in Kenya and my dad grew up in Pakistan. So I come from a family of people who really believed in, following their dreams. But I think they also believed that if you were going to do something, you should do it really well, So they said, that's fine. If you want to be a musician, that's great. But like, you need to apply the same rigor that you would to any other pursuit to music. You need to be really, like my dad would try to make me these practice schedules, and it didn't always go well. But there was this demand for rigor and excellence in whatever I chose, but I could choose whatever I wanted to do. So that was certainly a value in my family. And then, the other thing, admittedly, that's in me is that I get very motivated when people tell me that I can't do something. When someone says, hey, I don't think you're the best at this. I don't really think this is in you. And admittedly, I was a really good student. I was a valedictorian a couple times of various graduating classes. School was not difficult for me. But the one thing that was very hard for me was music. And I think that just attracted me because it felt like, oh, I can spend my whole life working towards this thing. And who knows, because it's not saying that other things aren't hard to do. They absolutely are. But at the time when I was deciding how I wanted my life to be, music felt like the most challenging thing and therefore the most exciting thing. And admittedly, I did have a lot of people who told me early on that I really didn't have what it took. And, they were wrong. It was a very motivating factor though. So yeah. Let's see. Next question. What goes through your mind when you sing or compose? I really wish I knew. I wish I knew what happened. I kind of feel like sometimes I'm thinking of very amorphous things, like, oh, I wish that a person could feel this way, or a person could connect to another person in this particular way. And then at other times, just a melody just comes to me and I kind of go with it. And I don't always start from a blank page. Sometimes I build on my past ideas. So if really nothing is happening, I'll try to go through another piece that I've written, or maybe another piece that another composer has written, and just get some ideas rolling around in there. And then sometimes, like I said for the very first question, when I hear something, then I can maybe add something to it and make it into something else. So yeah, those are the things that go through my mind, but it's a mystery. It is honestly a mystery. And so question 5, out of all you've composed, which 3 pieces are you the most proud of? Gosh, it's so hard to pick just 3 pieces. In a way, it would be like asking me to pick my 3 favorite students because I just don't. I love them all for different reasons. But these are the 3 that kind of are speaking to me right now. So I have this piece called Meri Sakhi Ki Awaaz, which means my sister's voice. And for me, it has an Indian classical singer and a Western classical singer and then an orchestra. And I'm really proud of that piece. I'm really proud because I think there were years and years and years of me working with this Hindustani singer, Siley Oak. We spent so long just thinking, okay, what are the craziest things we can think of? Like, what are the most interesting ways to connect these 2 cultures? And then we thought, okay, what's a kind of culminating work that we can put all of these ideas into and just test them out? And that was Meri Sakhi Ki Awaaz. And so I'm really proud of just what we were able to achieve. It seems like there's a little bit of everything we were thinking of in that piece. And, certainly it's also about helping one another across cultures and being each other's sounding boards. And so the message that it's about also really, really appeals to me. Yeah, the next one, I guess, is my piano trio. So this is a piece for violin, cello, and piano. And again, I wrote it over about 3 years. It was just just a massive, massive work to write. It's about half an hour long, and it's one that I I feel like I really poured my heart into over in the chamber music genre. I think chamber music can be really difficult to write sometimes, just because you have so few instruments and you're demanding so much of each of them. And you're also thinking about how each one interacts with the other one, but you don't have a whole orchestra to choose from. So yeah, the piano trio certainly was a moment of a lot of pride for me. And then I guess the last one I'd say is my oratorio, This Love Between Us. It's a piece for a choir, orchestra, and then sitar and tabla soloists. And, you know, just like the other pieces, I'm really proud of what kind of happened. I think Meri Saki Ki Awaaz, which is the first piece I mentioned, that one is almost the culmination of a lot of years of things, whereas This Love Between Us is kind of trying a lot of new things for the first time. So I can tell that I'm a little bit out of my element, but I'm taking that leap. And I want to say too that it's interesting because sometimes when you see the kind of reception a work gets, it will change the way you think about that piece. So I'm always really careful, especially when I hear a premiere of a piece, before I even turn around, before anyone says anything to me or whatever. In my mind, I try to think, okay, what did I actually feel about this piece? You know, what do I feel needed to be improved? What was I really proud of? And really kind of solidify my own ideas about a work in my mind before I ask for input from everyone else. Because what I'll sometimes notice is that there are certain works that get really praised, and they weren't necessarily your favorite works, or there's some things that you really, really loved and you think were really important pieces that no one else likes, right? And so I think you have to be really clear about what it is that's important to you and why. And I think in each of these cases, I was really proud of the process. I was really proud of the work that I put into it, and I was really proud of the musical result that I got. So yeah. Question number 6. How does your heritage and cultural background influence your compositions? It kind of informs everything about what I do, I would say, you know, because when I grew up, I didn't grow up around a lot of other Indian people. I mean, my family certainly had an Indian community, but, you know, in my school and especially in music, I didn't have a lot of Indian peers. And that's why, I mean, I'm so amazed to see like all these wonderful young Indian Desi young people going into music and studying it really seriously, because that was not the case when I was young. And so I really tried to seek out people who shared my heritage, who also were musicians, and they happened to be Indian musicians. And so for me, about 10 years ago, that journey became kind of a dual journey. I studied Indian classical vocal music, it's khayal, if you know that style, I had some teachers who were in the Patiala Gharana, and then the current person that I study with, which is Saili Oak, my collaborator, is Jaipur Gharana. And so I have that training, and then I also have the Western music training. And it's almost like, you know, you speak 2 different languages, you're speaking it to 2 different people, and then all of a sudden you start to see some connections between those languages. And how does that kind of manifest when you realize you're one person, even though you can speak these 2 different languages? How can you kind of bring those languages closer together, and how can you bring the people who speak those languages closer together so that they can maybe speak to one another? So that's what I'm trying to do in my music, and it's at times very hard, at times really fascinating, at times it goes beyond music and it goes into culture, because it's not necessarily about the sounds people are hearing, maybe it's more about the way that they feel about those sounds. So it allows me to really cross cultures myself. It allows me to be both an insider and an outsider in both Western and Indian classical music. And I love that. I love that experience of getting to have different identities based on where I go and what I'm doing. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Number 7, besides composing both for your enjoyment and that of your audience, do you hope that your music conveys a message? And if so, what? So I think if I could boil it down, I would say that I want people to feel that there's a place for them in my work. You know, I want people who come in who know something about Western orchestral music to feel that, you know, there's a place for them in my work, that they can kind of see themselves in it. I want people who come in from an Indian context to feel like they can really see themselves in my work. I want people who are not musicians at all, and who maybe don't know anything about music to also feel that there's a place for them in my work. And sometimes that's a place of being a listener. Sometimes that's a place of actually participating. And so I really try to think, like, who is my audience? Who are the people who I want to be my audience? And how can I write music that communicates with them? Because, yeah, I think that's just really important to me. The other thing that I like is the idea that I can build a relationship through my work. And that's both with the performer and with the audience. I think we can create systems as musicians and create systems as composers where you are kind of planning how people interact with one another. And they can interact with one another in these beautiful ways where they help and support one another. They can interact in ways where they are kind of warring with one another, you know, where they're trying to just shout over one another. And so I try to think of that in my orchestration, in the people I choose to be in the room, in the way that we work together, and in the actual working process of composing a piece. I try to think about that element of relationship, because to me, music is about connection and about communication. So, yeah, I hope that was interesting for you. Thanks so much for your questions.